Chasson Randle signs with the Phoenix Suns on a training camp contract. Who that is and what whether he will make this roster in Phoenix. And as the Sports Illustrated Top 100 continues to make everybody crazy, what can Devin Booker do to get into that top echelon, that top 10 really of players? And did we see a hint of it in the playoffs this year? All of that coming up right away on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen. I cover the Suns and the NBA at UpRocks. Been covering them for this show here for about 5 years now and ready for training camp, just like I'm sure all of you are. Closing out the week here on Locked On Suns. The last week without Suns basketball in our lives for many, many months. The last week of this show only being on your feed 3 times per week. So a lot is changing on Monday, starting right away. We will have Brandon here on Monday. We will be answering 13 questions that will define the Suns season, 13 big questions to preview the season. All of that is coming. But today we'll clean some house. A couple news items. Chasson Randle is where we'll start. And then I want to get to Devin Booker, like I said, finishing 15th in the SI Top 100. And again, I'm not going to use that to just yell at you and tell you why Devin Booker should be higher or any of that stuff. That can be for Twitter. That can be for you and your buddies. I'm not here to do that. But what I do think is interesting is Booker is now at a point where he is where we all, at least for most of us, sort of in the range that we think of him being. There's no more underrated talk for Devin Booker, but that brings with it a whole different type of conversation. So what can happen to break into that very, very top? We'll get there in a second. But let's talk about Randle. Look, it's not a super consequential move. I don't expect that this is going to be groundbreaking. I don't expect that this guy is going to revolutionize the team. He is already 28 years old. He went to Stanford and has had many, many stops in the NBA already. Philly, New York, Washington, Golden State, Orlando, and that doesn't even include some of the other places that he's played, Summer League and everything else. So, this is a known commodity. This is a finished, proven product. We know what he is. Last season with Orlando, he finally got a little bit of run, played 41 games, 20 minutes per game. And look, I think he's at least like an end-of-the-bench NBA player. He's in that cusp of probably too good to be in the G League, too not quite good enough to be on an NBA rotation, But setting all that aside, he is a guard, and that is an interesting part of this. He's 6'2", just straight up a point guard. I mean, he's like a scoring point guard. He's not going to get many assists, but going to go out there, set up your offense, and get some buckets. And it's interesting that the Suns would go that route here. We saw them do Chandler Hutchison, a 2-way deal with him. We know, Jalen Smith is going to get some run and an opportunity here. And, JaVale McGee is around now and everything else. But they have a lot of guards who will play a lot, right? They have between Payne, Paul, Booker, and Shamet. Those are all, basically starting caliber players who have started in the recent past on good teams. So the fact that they would bring Randle in is interesting to me, especially because he is not that young. So, again, I think the odds of, even if he was in a position of need, maybe on the wing a little bit more, I still think the odds of him making this roster are pretty slim, just knowing the math of it, right? They have one open roster spot. I highly doubt that they were saving that for Randle. We still don't know what will happen with this Thaddeus Young trade and everything else. So, unlikely that he was going to get there. But the fact that they picked a guard and a not very young guard as one of their training camp options is just interesting to me. It shows me that they do still want to have bodies there, that they do still, even if it's just to have some warm bodies during training camp. I mean, it's unfortunate. I don't mean to disparage Mr. Randle here, but that is the reality. Sometimes it's just useful to have guys who can go out there and play for you in training camp, and you get a look at them. Like, again, this is not a, ridiculous acquisition. This is not a player who's terrible and a waste of your time, but he's not going to make this roster in all likelihood, and is at a position where they already have a ton of players. So just interesting. I did do the deep dive of who is Chasson Randle's agent, to be like, maybe this is a favor. Maybe we're seeing something where James Jones is scratching someone's back with the expectation that his may be scratched in the not too distant future by that same person. I don't think that's where we are. So I don't remember the name of the agent, but he's a guy who does not have a lot of NBA clients, does not have anybody big and powerful that he represents. So this is just a straight up flyer. This is just, let's bring this guy in. He had a pretty decent year last year. James Jones does love the older players, the more experienced players. So I think that's really all this is. I have to give credit where credit is due. Brandon and I both, said they have to do something here. They have to bring more guys in. It's just, again, you can't waste resources too much. You do start to suffer. Is Chasson Randle going to make or break things? No, but you bring guys like this in. You have a competitive atmosphere in camp. These are just things you do. These are the boxes you check as an NBA franchise to eventually uncover a diamond in the rough. Maybe it's not even Randle, but maybe Randle being out there, there is that competitiveness. Maybe somebody else pops a little bit. Maybe, Randle, that agent situation does come into play. Whatever. It's, again, I'm not trying to read too much into it, but it is something that I will say did not happen in a coherent, cohesive way when Ryan McDonough was in charge. And at times it has felt like, is James Jones just going to pass up these opportunities as well? It doesn't seem like we're there. This is a thing every NBA team does. It is normal. It is reasonable. And the Suns are doing the normal and reasonable thing. On a day where the talk of the NBA is Gerson Rosas and his flame out of Minnesota, stability and normalcy is something to toast to here in Phoenix for folks who lived through some of the chaos here of the past few years. October, September, you usually think you're in the clear because everything's so hopeful and optimistic in the NBA. Suns fans know better. So obviously unrelated to Chasson Randle directly, but I will just say it's nice to be talking about a rudimentary move that will not move the needle and just is a regular course of business for the Suns. All right, let's get to the meat of the show. Devin Booker finishing in the SI Top 100 at the 15 mark. And I don't, again, want to bicker and debate about that, but I do want to talk a little bit about how can Booker, so like he's at basically the top of the non-consensus elite group right now. That's where he is. How does he get from there to top 10? What has to happen, and have we seen it before? Because I actually do think there are some points, places to point that show us what that might look like, and we've already seen them. So to that in just a second. First, though, a quick word from Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever, my favorite protein bar, and Built Bar likes to say the healthiest candy bar ever, and I can't argue with them. That's really what it tastes like. I don't find myself eating these things and concentrating on the protein aspect of it. I concentrate on how delicious they are. Some of these things you got to choke down because I just worked out. I'm about to work out. I'm feeling, like I haven't had enough food today. Let me choke down this bar. I know I'm not going to like it, whatever. Built Bar is the exact opposite. I literally have had to stop myself from having too many because, of course, you don't want to overload on the protein. You got to pace yourself. So there have been days where I'm like, is it a bad thing if I'm going to have 2 Built Bars in one day? Sometimes yes, but most of the time, save it till tomorrow. Put that mint brownie, put that salted caramel back in the pantry, come back to it the next time. But very, very delicious, each and every one. I've never tried a Built Bar I did not like. And the best part is they're all going to give you that same 17 to 18 grams of protein and no more than 180 calories. So you're not going to get bogged down. It's just that pick-me-up, just that rejuvenation. Maybe it is with a workout. Maybe it's just a snack. Maybe it's something that you just want to be able to know, I'm putting something good in my body that's going to help it, rather than a real candy bar or something worse. To get your next box of Built Bars, whether you've tried them before or this is your first time, you're going to go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, not first order, next order. You can dip back in there if you've done it before. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Okay, so Devin Booker finding his ultimate ranking here on the Sports Illustrated Top 100. And I'm trying to find the list here so we can talk about it. But it got me thinking, because there was a long time with these lists where the mere exclusion almost of Booker in and of itself was the story, right? He was way too low. He didn't make these lists. They were just complete underestimation of his talent. We would get on these types of podcasts and how is Booker 75th? Look at his numbers. And that's not where we are. And I think that reality in some ways is, it just allows us to have a more honest and open sort of clear view of what he is as a player. I think where he is right now, I mean, could he be above Bradley Beal? That I think so. I'm trying to find it here. 16, 15, 14. Okay, I had it wrong. I split the difference, and I had Chris Paul is at 14. Devin Booker is at 24. So my point was still the same. Bradley Beal, Donovan Mitchell, there are some of these players where you could imagine that he should be higher. I think these cluster of players, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, have been in the same order or in this cluster at the very least together for many years. And I feel like we were settled that Booker was at the top of that trio. Ben Simmons, some of these guys. The point remains, he is basically at the cusp of, I think that this is all a cluster. I think the difference between Kyrie and Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker and whatever, up until you get to Jason Tatum, who I do think you have to say is better than Devin Booker, it's all the same. And that cluster to me, that grouping, that tier is basically you are as good as you can be without being a number, like a bona fide, we will win the championship if we have a shot at a championship if we have you as our 1A option. Booker is a touch below that. I don't know if that's fair. I do feel like there is an argument to be made that Booker should be higher than Paul. I've made that argument for a long time. But the point is, Booker is at that level. And that is the honest way to look at things. That is the way that we're now able to just actually clear-headedly diagnose what he is. And I think it's fair. I think it's fair for him to not quite be in that top 15 or so, and to certainly not be in the top 10. I think that Jason Tatum cutoff is reasonable to me, because after that you're getting to, Rudy Gobert, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, Paul George. And I think, you're getting into an area where I think it's fair to say all those players have either proven more or just subjectively have more talent than Devin does. Where I'm going with all of this is that last hurdle is a lot of the time the toughest to clear. And I think there's also a little bit of humor to me in this, where Booker for a long time was penalized for not having been in a winning situation, not making the playoffs, not doing whatever. So it is interesting to me that now that he is proving himself in the postseason, that he's falling behind players who have proven less in the playoffs, or at least last season did far less and looked, if we were to judge from the playoffs, like you would put them considerably behind Book, right? Like Rudy Gobert is coming off of a situation where he was, laughed off the floor in the playoffs. Bradley Beal has he has never led a team to the postseason without John Wall there for a real actual deep run. These are all players who have not done that. So it is interesting to me from that perspective. But the fact remains, Booker, in order to get to that top level, is going to have to do new things. We are now at a point where everybody gets the Devin Booker thing. We're all seeing it. We all appreciate it. We all get it. He's being represented as such in a list like this. And yet, he's not where we would necessarily want him to be. I'm sure Suns fans are looking at this thinking he should be higher. And so he really does have to improve now. And that's what's interesting to me. Like we are at this inflection point where he has done he's an all-star. He's made the finals. He has performed in the playoffs. He's now to this point where this next chapter, this next level for him is going to require some genuine development of new things we haven't seen from him before. And I think that particularly interesting within that is we saw it. That's what's cool to me. We saw Devin Booker do some of these things during the postseason. I'll get into them in more detail in a moment, but pull-up shooting, something anyone who's watched Book for as long as we all have knows, pull-up shooting, three-point shooting in general has not come along the way you might hope. He had some incredible performances. Obviously, the closeout game against the Lakers, there were many where that shooting came through in a really big way. Defense, obviously, and that's where I think I want to go in a second, really break things down is the defense. But just generally my point is we are at this, Book is at the cusp of the actual top number one tier in the league. People are treating him as such now. And to get there, there's going to have to be some legitimate developments. And so let's get into what those are. Because I think that's a way more interesting way to have the conversation is not, should he be 2 spots higher? Should Kyrie be where Kyrie is? We all saw the debates on Twitter and stuff if you were on it. The more important thing is if, as a Suns fan, you want Devin Booker to continue to progress upward, then that's what matters is how's he going to get there? So we'll dive into that and all of it in just a second. First, though, a quick word from Rock Auto. The ever-increasing numbers of makes and models. I love that phrasing by them, the ever-increasing. It's impossible to walk into a dealership or even a retail chain store and expect to get what you want. You're most likely going to get screwed over. Well, Rock Auto solves that problem. If you have internet access, if you have a computer, you can get on and you can cut yourself out all of that frustration, all of that work, and use Rock Auto instead. So really that easy. You type in the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need. You type the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, click purchase, and it's at your door within days. That's really it. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more on the same exact part when you could use Rock Auto and save a ton of money? It's really doesn't seem that complicated to me. I've needed stuff in the past. Rock Auto's always been there. If I go to the dealership, I'm going to have to pay double. I had to buy a rear view mirror one time, the exterior one. I hit it on the garage door and had to replace it. It's like $60 from the dealership. They were going to charge me because they have to paint it and do all of this and that. I have a black car. I don't need anything special. There's black version of this everywhere. Rock Auto had one, bought it, installed it, no problem. That's really as easy as it is. Cut out the middleman. No even account necessary, let alone a subscription or any of that. You don't have to drive anywhere. It is that smooth, that simple, and that effective. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. And back and better than ever for this football season. Your number one spot for pro and college football action all season long. A new updated site and interface, which means even more odds, props, and contests for you, where BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. What you're going to do to celebrate the arrival of football season here is go to betonline.ag, sign up today, and when you make your first deposit, use the promo code NFL100 to get a 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. So from football, basketball, and boxing to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers throughout the 2021 season at betonline.ag. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Okay, so the interesting thing to me that I've been teasing here is Booker showed us that the skill development could be coming. And it could be coming this season. And I think that's the place to start because For those who might have forgotten the numbers or never knew them in the first place, Booker last season, the assist percentage went from 30% in 2019-20 to 21, just below 21% last year. He had his overall usage rate go up a little bit because he was scoring more and turning the ball over less. But I think actually really the turnovers going down was the biggest part in the usage going up. But the assist rate was way down. And I think this is the season where he will start to get back to and figure out a way to coexist with Chris Paul. Not only coexist with Chris Paul, but almost to coexist with his own stardom in a new way. Because I think there was that filling out process with Rubio where it was like, okay, I have a real point guard now. What does this look like? I have the ball in my hands. I think Book had the ball in his hands a little bit more than a lot of us might have expected that first year with Rubio, just because we were so used to Rubio being, pass first, score never type of player. They were able to find a balance with that stuff that worked for them. And then obviously with Chris Paul, Book took quite a back seat with that. So I think this is a season where you really could see that balance start to go back a little bit. I think you could see Booker taking on way more of the responsibility of playmaking, whether that's when Paul is on the bench, whether that's when Paul is, just acting as more of a floor spacer. Maybe those are games when, maybe we are now at the point where Chris Paul might rest a little bit. And all of those are times where Booker is going to be able to make magic. So that's the place to start. That's the obvious. But what we really saw in the postseason, aside from Booker taking more on than I think I was expecting him to be able to do in his first playoff run, is that he showed us the skills that he's going to potentially be able to add. And I guess maybe saying add is the wrong way to put it if we're already seeing them, but a few numbers. So in the postseason last year, I think the defense is where I want to start. And that's not going to be the numbers, but I want to start with the positive. So one of my lingering memories of the finals was doing shows and running into issues, trying to imagine how do the Suns defensively do enough where they are obviously focusing on stopping Giannis, but then secondarily, we saw, Drew Holiday was having big nights here and there. They had to keep him honest. And Chris Middleton was unreal for a lot of that series. What ended up being the solution was Mikal Bridges at the point of attack on Drew Holiday and more Devin Booker on Chris Middleton. I think Book in the finals last year when he got the chances here and there to defend Middleton was some of the better defensive moments we've ever seen from him. And I don't think that's going to necessarily happen during the regular season. I don't think it needs to. I think this team's going to be a regular season behemoth. I'm not worried about that. I don't think Booker should be necessarily asked to do that much on defense, but we saw the glimpses there of what Booker's strength in particular, ability to read the game, the improvements that he has in terms of just defensive awareness really come together. And you saw the flashes of like, is he going to be, Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum level of defensive player? I don't think so. Obviously, I think that we already would have known that by now. But I think Booker can get to the point where he actually is a plus. I think he can get to being a plus on defense. And I think we could see that as soon as this year. I think that would go a long way because if you look at the all-encompassing sort of one metric grades for him, the numbers are always awful for the defense. Still, even last year when he had better teammates, and we all can look at the games and say he looks better, the numbers still show that he is honestly, in some cases, like pretty atrocious on the defensive end in a box score per 100, sort of adjusted metric. So the defense improving would be huge for him in terms of the value he's providing to the team, how much better they're able to be when he's on the floor. And then, of course, if they do make the playoffs next year, which, of course, we all assume they will be, that's when he can really prove it. And maybe some of these reactive ideas about last year's playoffs, maybe they treat him a little bit better this time. The other area where we saw, I guess, the lack of something shows us where Booker can take that leap and really be that bona fide two-way, I'm the best player, I'm a ticket to the second or third round every year type of player, is we didn't see him attack the rim. And that is another lingering thing that I think we all are feeling. So yes, three-point shooting is big. Yes, figuring out the balance of ball handling and playmaking duties with Chris Paul is big, and the defense and everything else. I think underestimated part of that too is the shot selection. And I'm not saying that there's no precedent for a player being at that level and taking, the types of shots that Booker does. But I think it's more about maximizing what he is good at. And so, yes, of course, the mid-range, it's overly simple to say that the mid-range and taking those shots and everything else is where the problem is. I think that ignores the fact that those are good shots for him, that he makes them, that we just saw, if we're referencing the playoffs, we just saw Booker able to do a lot of damage taking quite a few of those shots. So it's not to say to not take those, but it went down his rim frequency last year from the regular season to the playoffs. Already very low, 24% of his shots coming at the rim. In the playoffs, it was 16% of his total shots were coming at the rim. That obviously has trickle-down effects when it comes to free throw rate and how often you're getting to the line, getting those easy shots, how the defense is having to react to you. If they don't think you're ever going to do that, they don't defend you that way. They can, go over on screens or some of these other things that they wouldn't dare do if he kept them honest and was able to attack the rim a little bit more. I think the one, obviously Kobe Bryant, very mid-range heavy player, but a different style, posting up a lot, doing triangle stuff, very different than how Booker is really used. The other one would be Carmelo Anthony. But if you look so Booker last year from a free throw perspective averaged 5.9 per game, down from the previous year. Another example of what a, sort of interesting and very different type of season than we had the expectation for that last year was for Booker. 5.9 per game. Carmelo Anthony, during his peak years from, let's say, 2008 or so, 2007 through about 2013, 14, those were the best years of his career. He was up over 7 free throw attempts per game every single season. So, he was not a drive in and dunk on your head type of player. Of course, he was, operating at the elbow in isolation, some of the same places that Booker likes to score. And he was still getting to the line. I know he's bigger. I know there's differences. He's stronger, whatever. He's probably going to get a more friendly whistle. But there's just not a precedent for a player who doesn't consistently get those easy shots, either by converting layups or by getting to the free throw line, who is a bona fide elite level scorer that is capable of taking a team to, title contention every single season. So that, to me, we didn't see sometimes when we wanted to last year during the postseason. And obviously the defense is something we did see the flashes of. So the recipe's right there. And that's really the thing to take away is, if you're wondering why Booker's low, if you're mad, if you're, just tired of having this debate, whatever it might be, I think that's the thing to really lean on is Booker is capable. We know what the things are. He has shown that he can do them. And I think the comfort level in year 2 with Chris Paul is going to go a long way as well. So we're creeping up slowly. I do think come next year when we see these lists again, Booker will be even higher. And I think, we're in for another special regular season here, and we're probably in for another relatively deep playoff run. So we'll have way more to operate on, and we'll get to continue to see the evolution of this guy that we've all gotten to see from, the time he had a baby face and we had no idea what he was going to be to now. It's special, and I'm excited to keep watching it. And I do think we're trending in the right direction still, even though I can feel the opposite. All right, that is it for today. That is it for our 3 days a week schedule. Brandon will be back Monday to start us off. And then on Tuesday, I will have my thoughts from Suns Media Day, all the things that will be said there as we get ready. We are not too far from another Suns season. Hopefully you guys are excited. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend, and I will talk to you on the other side.